In the cultural heart of Philadelphia, where history, innovation, and creativity intertwine, stands a museum that redefines what it means to experience art. The Barnes Foundation. This isn't just a museum filled with beautiful paintings. It's a living philosophy, a radical experiment in how human beings see, feel, and understand the world through art. From the moment you step inside, the atmosphere feels different. Sunlight filters softly through modern glass walls, illuminating masterpieces that seem to breathe with life. Every brushstroke, every hue, every placement in the room has meaning, carefully arranged to awaken your senses and challenge your mind. Founded by Dr. Albert C. Barnes in the early 20th century, the Barnes Foundation began as a deeply personal vision. Dr. Barnes was not a traditional collector or art patron. He was a thinker, a scientist, and a social reformer who believed that art could transform people's lives. He saw in paintings and sculptures not just beauty, but lessons about color, emotion, structure, and human experience. Today, the museum holds one of the world's most valuable and breathtaking private collections of art. Imagine standing before a sea of Renoirs, glowing with warmth and humanity. Turn your head, and you're face to face with the bold geometry of Cezanne, the emotional color fields of Matisse, the fierce creativity of Picasso, and the dreamlike visions of Van Gogh. Each gallery is a dialogue not just between artworks, but between centuries, cultures, and ideas. But the Barnes Foundation is far more than a treasure house of masterpieces. It is a revolution in perception. Dr. Barnes believed that art should not be confined to the elite, nor studied only by experts. He wanted everyone, workers, students, thinkers, and dreamers, to look at art as a language of life. Here, art is not explained, it's experienced. The visitor becomes a student, the gallery, a classroom, and each canvas a teacher of balance, rhythm, and emotion. As you walk through its serene halls, you feel the harmony Dr. Barnes envisioned, the balance between light and shadow, intellect and feeling, beauty and truth. This is more than a collection of paintings. It is a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting how we see, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Barnes Foundation, a place where beauty meets intellect, where art becomes an education of the soul, and where every visitor leaves seeing the world and themselves a little differently. Behind every great museum is a dreamer, and for the Barnes Foundation, that dreamer was Dr. Albert C. Barnes, a man of contradictions, brilliance, and bold ideas. Barnes wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He built his legacy from determination, intellect, and an unshakable belief that art could change lives. Albert Barnes was born in 1872, in a modest Philadelphia neighborhood. His father was a butcher, his mother, a devout woman with a fierce sense of discipline. From an early age, Barnes showed two sides, the sharp curiosity of a scientist and the sensitive eye of an artist. But life in working-class America offered little room for dreams. So Barnes fought his way upward, fueled by intelligence and an almost stubborn hunger to learn. He studied chemistry at the University of Pennsylvania, then went on to earn a medical degree. But his true breakthrough came not from medicine, but from invention. In 1902, alongside a German chemist, Barnes developed Renoir, a silver-based antiseptic that revolutionized eye treatments and earned him a fortune. By his mid-30s, Dr. Barnes was a millionaire. But instead of building mansions or chasing status, he built something far more meaningful, a lifelong passion for art and education. Traveling through Europe, Barnes fell in love with the works of modern painters, artists who were often dismissed or ridiculed by the establishment. While others ignored them, he saw genius. In the bold strokes of Cezanne he saw structure and geometry. In the soft colors of Renoir, he saw humanity and warmth. In Matisse's flowing forms, he saw emotional truth. These weren't just pictures to him, they were visual equations, filled with rhythm, balance, and meaning. But Barnes's greatest insight wasn't just in collecting art, it was in understanding it. He believed that art was a universal language, one that could teach the principles of life itself: harmony, proportion, contrast, and unity. And just as importantly, he believed that anyone could learn that language, not just scholars or the rich. He began inviting factory workers, students, and everyday people into his growing collection, teaching them to look, truly look, at art. He guided them to see how a Renoir's brushwork related to a wrought iron hinge, or how a Cezanne still life shared the same structure as a piece of African sculpture. Through this, he taught that beauty isn't a privilege, it's a skill of perception. Barnes was inspired by the ideas of philosopher John Dewey, whose writings on education and experience shaped his vision. He saw art as an active process, not passive observation, something to engage with, question, and feel. For him, art wasn't a luxury, it was education, a mirror to human emotion, intellect, and creativity. And perhaps what made Dr. Barnes truly revolutionary was his defiance of the elite. He distrusted the art world's hierarchy, the critics, curators, and wealthy patrons who, in his eyes, used art to show status instead of seeking understanding. To Barnes, art was not a trophy, it was a teacher, and he dedicated his life to ensuring that his foundation would embody that belief. So, When he established the Barnes Foundation in 1922, it was not to show off his collection, but to create a school of vision, a sanctuary where people from all walks of life could come to think, feel, and grow through art. Dr. Albert C. Barnes wasn't just a collector. He was a scientist of beauty, a philosopher of perception, and a rebel against convention. His dream wasn't just to preserve paintings, but to ignite minds, to prove that within every person lies the power to see the world with depth, clarity, and wonder. By the early 1920s, Dr. Albert C. Barnes had everything a man of ambition could want: success, wealth, and one of the most impressive private art collections in the world. But for Barnes, possession was never the goal. What mattered was purpose, and that purpose took shape in 1922, when he founded the Barnes Foundation, not as a museum, but as a school for learning through art. He chose to build it in Marion, Pennsylvania, a quiet suburb just outside Philadelphia. Far from the noise of the city and the influence of the art establishment he distrusted, he wanted a place of focus, reflection, and study where art could be seen as he believed it should be, not as decoration or prestige, but as a living language of form and feeling. The building itself became a manifestation of his philosophy. Designed by architect Paul Felipe Cret, the structure was elegant but simple. No grand marble staircases or gilded halls, just harmony and proportion. Every window, wall, and gallery space was designed to support seeing. Natural light poured gently into the rooms, revealing the subtle colors of a Renoir, the structure of a Cezanne, or the quiet balance of a Matisse. But what truly set the Barnes Foundation apart was how the art was arranged. Barnes didn't follow traditional curatorial rules: no chronological order, no separation by nationality or style. Instead, he created what he called ensembles, carefully composed groupings of paintings, furniture, metalwork, and sculpture. A 19th-century French painting might hang beside a medieval hinge, an African mask beside a landscape, and a simple kitchen utensil beneath a Picasso. To the untrained eye, it might seem random, even chaotic, but to Barnes, every placement was intentional. He believed that beauty followed universal principles: line, color, light, and space, and that these principles connected all forms of human creativity. By arranging works this way, he taught viewers to see the relationships between objects, not their labels. He wanted people to notice the rhythm of a curve, the echo of a shape, the harmony of contrasting tones across cultures, centuries, and mediums. Students who came to study at the foundation weren't given lectures about art history. Instead, they were guided to look, observe, and interpret. Barnes encouraged them to describe what they saw, to think critically, and to trust their own perception. His classrooms blended art, philosophy, and psychology, a place where learning came not from memorizing facts, but from engaging with visual experience itself. And to protect his vision, Barnes crafted a charter and trust that were almost sacred. He outlined exactly how his collection should be displayed. No artwork could be moved, loaned, or sold. The galleries, he declared, must remain exactly as he designed them forever. He was determined that the foundation would never fall into the hands of the art elite or become just another tourist attraction. The opening of the Barnes Foundation in 1925 was not a grand public event. There were no lavish ceremonies or red carpets. It was quiet, deliberate, and deeply personal, a sanctuary for those who truly sought to understand art. Inside those walls, Dr. Barnes created a world that blurred the boundaries between education and emotion, intellect and intuition. It was a living classroom, a spiritual space where each painting and object played a part in the symphony of visual understanding. The foundation stood as a bold declaration that art is not a possession to be admired from a distance. It is a force to be studied, felt, and lived. And in the calm halls of Marion, surrounded by masterpieces and the fragrance of the gardens outside, Dr. Barnes's dream began to breathe, quietly reshaping the way generations would see art forever. Step inside the galleries of the Barnes Foundation, and you enter a universe of color, rhythm, and light, a place where some of the most extraordinary artworks ever created share the same space, breathing together in harmony. The scope of the collection is nothing short of astonishing. It contains more than 4,000 works of art, including 900 paintings, but it's not just the quantity that amazes, it's the quality. Here you will find names that define art history itself: Renoir, Cézanne, Matisse, Picasso, Van Gogh, Modigliani, Sarah Degas, Rousseau, and countless others. Each piece tells a story, and together they form a dialogue, a visual symphony that transcends time and culture. Dr. Barnes's taste was visionary. He collected not with the instincts of a wealthy buyer, but with the insight of a philosopher. He sought out paintings that embodied structure, balance, and emotion, works that revealed the universal principles of design. He saw beyond the critics of his time. While the art world dismissed Impressionism and modern art as radical or unfinished, Barnes saw in them the birth of a new visual language. The collection's heart and soul lies in its Renoirs, more than 180 of them, the largest single group in existence. His Renoirs shimmer with warmth and humanity, glowing skin tones, intimate gatherings, tender expressions of love and light. Nearby hang 69 works by Paul Cézanne, the master of structure and depth. His landscapes of Mont Saint-Victoire, his still lifes of apples, his studies of form, all echo Barnes's belief that art is both science and spirit. Then come the bold, rhythmic lines of Matisse, nearly 60 paintings, including The Joy of Life and The Dance, too, works that pulse with color and emotion. Barnes recognized Matisse's genius long before the art world did. The two became friends, united by a shared passion for visual harmony and education. Matisse even traveled to Marion to personally install his monumental mural, The Dance, designed specifically for the Foundation's main hall, a gesture of respect for Barnes's vision. There is Picasso, fierce and daring, his works vibrating with energy and intellect. Van Gogh, whose brushstrokes burn with emotion and vulnerability. Serra, with his precise dots of color, constructing entire worlds from science and light. Modigliani, whose elongated figures radiate melancholy beauty. Each of these artists occupies a place in Barnes's grand design, not isolated by fame, but connected by form, balance, and feeling. Yet the Barnes collection goes beyond paintings. It includes African sculptures, Native American jewelry, antique furniture, Greek antiquities, Pennsylvania Dutch ironwork, and even humble tools from daily life. Barnes placed them side by side, defying hierarchy, showing that a piece of African carving held the same artistic integrity as a European masterpiece. In his eyes, beauty was not determined by geography or wealth. It was universal. Every gallery was carefully composed like a musical score. A Renoir nude might hang above an African mask, framed by hand-forged metal hinges that echoed the curves of the figure. A Cezanne still life might align perfectly with the pattern of a chair's carving or the shadow of a lamp. Nothing was random. Every inch was intentional. Barnes called this approach the logic of visual relationships. He wanted visitors to see connections, to understand that the same principles of color, light, and design exist across all forms of creation. His collection became not just a museum, but a map of human expression, an atlas of beauty, drawn from every corner of the world. To walk through the Barnes Foundation is to walk through Dr. Barnes's mind. It's not simply about admiring masterpieces, but about learning to perceive, to feel the rhythm between objects, to sense the pulse of harmony running through everything. It's an experience that blurs the line between art and life itself. And as visitors move from room to room, surrounded by centuries of creativity, they begin to understand Barnes's ultimate message, that art is not separate from us, it is us. It reflects our desires, our intellect, our struggles, and our search for meaning. Here, amid the glow of Renoir's warmth, the structure of Cezanne and the boldness of Matisse, the story of humanity unfolds, vibrant, timeless, and alive. If there is one thing that sets the Barnes Foundation apart from every other museum in the world, it is its method, a way of seeing, studying, and understanding art that came entirely from the mind of Dr. Albert C. Barnes. It wasn't about memorizing names, dates, or historical movements. It was about learning how to see. Dr. Barnes believed that art was not something you simply looked at, it was something you experienced. He developed a radical teaching system that would transform art education forever, a method that came to be known as the Barnes Method. At its core, the Barnes Method is built on 4 visual elements: line, color, light, and space. Barnes taught that these elements form the grammar of visual art, just as words form the grammar of language. To understand a painting, he said, you don't need to know who painted it or when. You only need to observe how these elements interact, how they create rhythm, harmony, and balance. He wanted his students to stop relying on experts, critics, and labels, and to trust their own eyes. Imagine standing before a Cezanne still life. Instead of talking about the artist's biography, Barnes would ask his students, what do you see in the lines of the apples? How do the colors interact? Where does your eye travel first? What emotion does the structure create? Through these questions, students learn to read a painting the way a musician reads sheet music, by understanding its underlying composition. He often placed unexpected objects side by side, a painting, a piece of metalwork, a chair, or a sculpture, and asked his students to find the connections. A curved iron hinge might echo the line of a figure's arm. A wooden chair's pattern might repeat the rhythm of brushstrokes in a landscape. These juxtapositions weren't coincidences. They were lessons in seeing unity across different forms of creativity. Barnes's approach was deeply influenced by philosopher John Dewey, whose ideas on education and experience shaped much of 20th century thought. Dewey believed that learning should come from doing, from experience, not memorization. Barnes took this to heart. His foundation became a laboratory of perception, where students developed their minds through observation, dialogue, and reflection. Classes at the foundation were small, intense, and deeply personal. Students, often everyday people, not scholars, gathered before the artworks with notebooks in hand. They weren't told what to think. They were encouraged to describe what they saw. Over time, they began to perceive relationships between artworks that transcended style or period. They learned that a Renoir, a Grecian pot, and a handcrafted key could all share the same beauty in proportion and rhythm. This method wasn't just about art, it was about thinking. Barnes wanted people to apply these principles to life itself, to see patterns, connections, and harmony in the world around them. He believed that developing visual intelligence led to emotional intelligence, that seeing deeply could teach us how to live deeply. To reinforce this philosophy, the Foundation published books and held lectures, all rooted in visual analysis. Barnes's language was often challenging, part scientific, part poetic, but his message was always clear, that art is not an object to possess, it's a conversation to enter. Critics often misunderstood his approach. Some found it rigid, others too unconventional. But those who studied under Barnes described it as transformative. They spoke of moments when art suddenly clicked, when they could see rhythm, balance, and design, not just in paintings, but in the world itself. Today, this teaching tradition continues. At the Barnes Foundation, visitors and students still use the same method to engage with art. Interactive programs, workshops, and online courses keep Barnes's educational spirit alive. Even the museums. Modern design mirrors the principles of the method: open spaces, balanced light, and carefully arranged ensembles that guide the eye through patterns of harmony. The Barnes method isn't just a way to study art, it's a way to see the universe. It teaches that beauty isn't hidden in museums, it exists in everything, waiting to be recognized by those who know how to look. For Dr. Barnes, this was the ultimate lesson, that to see art deeply is to understand life itself. That vision, true vision, is not about looking harder, but about seeing more clearly. For all his brilliance and generosity, Dr. Albert C. Barnes was also a man of fierce independence. And that very independence would become both the power and the peril of the Barnes Foundation. From the beginning, Barnes was determined that his institution would not fall under the control of the social or cultural elite. He distrusted Philadelphia's high society, the powerful museum, boards, critics, and wealthy patrons who, in his view, turned art into a symbol of status rather than a source of wisdom. To him, art was sacred, and the art world, too often, was not. He once called the city's cultural establishment a bunch of stuffed shirts, and he meant it. When they invited him into their circles, he refused. When they offered to celebrate his collection publicly, he declined. He didn't want art to be trapped in velvet ropes or dictated by critics. He wanted people to learn from it directly, free from pretense. This defiance made Barnes both admired and despised. The more the elite sought to claim his foundation as part of their cultural empire, the more he resisted. He closed the Barnes Foundation to the general public for years, allowing only students, scholars, and invited guests to visit. Even those visits were strictly controlled. No cameras, no sketching, no note-taking without permission. He protected his collection as if it were a living organism, fragile, pure, and not to be exploited. He wrote letters that scorched with wit and fury, especially toward those who tried to challenge his vision. He fought with journalists, university presidents, and even fellow collectors. Some called him arrogant. Others saw a man determined to defend integrity in a world of vanity. And yet, beneath that intensity was something noble. Barnes truly believed he was protecting art from becoming commercialized, from being turned into spectacle. His foundation, he insisted, was not a museum, it was a school, a laboratory of vision, not a stage for society's approval. But in his effort to preserve that purity, Barnes created a paradox. He made the world's most extraordinary collection of art, and then made it nearly impossible for the world to see it. When he died suddenly in 1951, the struggle for control began. His will was explicit, even ironclad. He decreed that his collection should never be moved, never sold, and never rearranged. The galleries, he wrote, must remain exactly as he designed them. Each painting, each hinge, each object, frozen in its original position. Forever, he left the foundation under the care of Lincoln University, a historically black college in Pennsylvania, a final act of social defiance, ensuring that his legacy would serve education rather than elitism. It was a powerful, progressive gesture, decades ahead of its time, but the decades that followed were filled with turmoil. Financial troubles, legal challenges, and political pressure mounted. The foundation's endowment was limited. Its strict rules made fundraising nearly impossible, and the Marion neighborhood resisted the influx of visitors who wanted to see the collection. Lawsuits and court battles stretched for years, with one central question haunting them all: should Barnes's vision remain untouchable, or should it adapt to survive? The debate tore at the soul of the art world. Supporters of Barnes's wishes saw any change as betrayal, the violation of a man's sacred will. Others argued that keeping the collection hidden was a disservice to humanity, that art of such magnitude should be accessible to all. What followed would become one of the most controversial sagas in the history of American art, a moral and cultural struggle between preservation and progress, between vision and reality. It was no longer just about paintings on walls. It was about the meaning of legacy, and who, in the end, has the right to define it. Dr. Barnes had built a sanctuary for truth and beauty. guarded fiercely against corruption. But after his death, that sanctuary became a battlefield, and the fight for the Barnes Foundation was only just beginning. For decades after Dr. Albert C. Barnes's death, his foundation stood in quiet Marion, guarded by his will, preserved like a time capsule of his genius. Every painting hung exactly where he had placed it. Every hinge, sculpture, and chair remained untouched. It was as if time had stopped inside those walls. But outside, the world was changing. By the 1980s and 1990s, the Barnes Foundation faced serious financial trouble. The strict terms of Dr. Barnes's will made it nearly impossible to raise funds or expand access. Only a small number of visitors were allowed to enter each week, and the cost of maintaining such a priceless collection was immense. The foundation's trustees faced a painful dilemma: how to keep the collection alive without betraying the man who built it. Then came the storm. Powerful voices from government officials to philanthropists and museum leaders began to push for a solution. They argued that moving the foundation from its secluded home in Marion to downtown Philadelphia would save it. There, they said, it could reach millions, attract tourism, and secure the funding needed to survive, but too many. This was unthinkable. Dr. Barnes had been clear, painfully stubbornly clear. His collection was not to be moved under any circumstance. To relocate it would mean breaking his will, violating the principles that defined his life's work. Still, the pressures grew stronger. Years of legal battles followed. Courtroom arguments, public protests, documentaries, and bitter debates filled newspapers and television screens. It became one of the most heated cultural controversies in American history, often called the art world's greatest heist. Supporters of the move claimed it was a necessary evolution, that Barnes's mission to educate the public could only continue if more people had access to his collection. Opponents called it a betrayal, a corporate takeover of a man's soul and vision. In the end, the courts ruled in favor of the move, citing the foundation's dire financial need. And so, in 2012, after years of turmoil, the unthinkable happened. The Barnes Foundation left Marion and reopened in downtown Philadelphia, along the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, just steps away from the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The very establishment Barnes had once resisted. But this was no ordinary relocation. Architects Todd Williams and Billy Tian were tasked with an almost impossible mission to recreate Barnes's original galleries exactly as they were, down to the inch. They measured every wall, every window, every artwork's placement, and replicated the ensembles with perfect precision. Inside the new building, the rooms appeared almost identical to those in Marion. The same order, the same balance, the same intimate scale, yet the context was new. Outside the glass walls, the city's skyline gleamed. Sunlight poured in through modern architectural lines, blending the energy of a 21st-century city with the timeless calm of Barnes's vision. Visitors who once had to wait months for a rare appointment could now walk freely through the galleries. Students from around the world could study his method in modern classrooms and digital archives. For the first time, the Barnes Foundation felt truly open, a place of learning, just as Dr. Barnes had intended, though in a setting he never imagined. Still, controversy lingered. Some who had known the old Marion site felt a deep loss, as if the foundation had left behind a piece of its soul. Others saw the move as a rebirth, a resurrection of Barnes's ideals in a form suited to a new era. Walking through the new museum, it's hard not to feel both emotions at once. There's reverence in the silence, awe in the precision, and a strange kind of poetry in the fact that Barnes's vision, born from rebellion, survived through transformation. The move to Philadelphia remains one of the most debated moments in modern museum history. Was it a victory for accessibility or a defeat for authenticity? Perhaps, in some ways, it was both. But what cannot be denied is this: Dr. Barnes's spirit still lives in every gallery, in every ensemble, in every carefully arranged conversation between art and object. His vision of beauty as education, of art as a universal language, continues to guide the Barnes Foundation, even in its new home. And for millions who now walk through those glowing halls in the heart of Philadelphia, the experience remains what Barnes always intended it to be: an awakening of the eye, the mind, and the soul. Step inside the new Barnes Foundation on Philadelphia's Benjamin Franklin Parkway, and the first thing you feel is calm, a quiet, almost sacred balance between nature, light, and art. The air seems to hum with anticipation. You're not just walking into a museum, you're entering an experience designed with meticulous intention, where architecture and philosophy merge into one seamless vision. The building itself, designed by Todd Williams and Billy Tian, is a masterpiece of subtlety and respect. From the outside, its limestone walls glow softly in the sunlight, a modern temple to art that feels both monumental and intimate. The water features that frame the entrance create a mirror-like stillness, reflecting the sky, the trees, and the city's movement beyond. It's as if the museum breathes with its surroundings, reminding visitors that art, like life, exists in harmony with the world around it. Inside, the lighting is natural and warm. Windows are carefully placed to allow sunlight to filter in, never too harsh, never too dim. The galleries open, one after another, each arranged exactly as Dr. Barnes had intended. Paintings, metalwork, furniture, and decorative art objects positioned together in ensembles. Deliberate groupings that reveal hidden relationships between form, line, and color. Look closely, and you'll see what makes this place so extraordinary. A Renoir portrait might hang beside a piece of African sculpture, its rhythmic curves echoing the softness of the painted figure's form. A Matisse might face an antique door hinge, both exploring balance and repetition. Every wall is a lesson, every placement a conversation. The more you look, the more you begin to see, not just art, but the invisible patterns that connect them all. This was Dr. Barnes's true genius, to teach people to look beyond labels, beyond fame, beyond price tags. Here, art isn't arranged by period, nationality, or style. It's arranged by vision, by the universal language of design and emotion. And though this new Barnes is filled with the energy of the modern world, digital tools, research centers, educational spaces, and bustling visitors, the soul of the original remains untouched. The wooden floors creak softly underfoot, the rooms are intimate and human, and the artworks still hang just inches apart, creating a dense, electric dialogue that feels alive. Walk into the main gallery, and you'll find yourself surrounded by color, the warmth of Renoir's skin tones, the crystalline blues of Cezanne's landscapes, the fire of Van Gogh's brushwork. Turn a corner, and you're met with the confident simplicity of Matisse's line, the bold geometry of Picasso's forms, and the quiet depth of Modigliani's gaze. Every piece, every arrangement, feels like a heartbeat in the larger rhythm of art itself. In the lower level, the museum opens to modern amenities, classrooms, an auditorium, and the Barnes Arboretum archives, honoring Dr. Barnes's lifelong love of nature. Students and scholars study his methods, analyzing how visual relationships create emotional impact. Workshops and lectures bring new generations into the fold, keeping Barnes's belief in learning through seeing alive. And throughout it all, a sense of peace pervades the space. Despite its downtown location, the Barnes Foundation feels secluded like a sanctuary. The architecture shields you from the city's noise, inviting you to slow down, to truly look. It's in that stillness that the museum works its quiet magic. Visitors often describe the experience as transformative. It's not just about appreciating famous paintings, it's about seeing connections between art and life, beauty and intellect, past and present. Every gallery becomes a mirror for your own thoughts, emotions, and imagination. This is the essence of the modern Barnes, not a museum frozen in time, but a living classroom for the senses. A place where the art of seeing becomes an act of understanding, and where the ideas of one visionary man continue to inspire generations to look closer, think deeper, and feel more profoundly. In this new space, modern yet timeless, open yet deeply personal, the Barnes Foundation stands as proof that great art doesn't just survive change. It evolves with it, and in that evolution, it continues to teach us the very lesson Dr. Barnes devoted his life to, that beauty, when truly seen, has the power to change how we see everything else. At its core, the Barnes Foundation has always been more than a museum. It is a school of seeing. Education was not a side project for Dr. Albert Barnes. It was his true purpose. He believed that art had the power to transform lives, not through lectures or theories, but through the act of looking, of perceiving relationships between color, line, form, and feeling. From the very beginning, Barnes's foundation operated not as a public gallery, but as an educational institution. Students came from all walks of life, factory workers, teachers, artists, and everyday citizens gathering in intimate classrooms to discuss art in ways few had ever done before. Dr. Barnes insisted that anyone could learn to appreciate art deeply if they learned how to truly observe. He called it the art of seeing. In those early years, the classes were intense, personal, and revolutionary. Students were encouraged to compare paintings with objects from nature, flowers, shells, textiles, and to explore the emotional rhythms within visual design. No labels, no historical timelines, no elitist hierarchy. Art was democratic, art was human, it belonged to everyone. That same philosophy lives on today, inside the modern Barnes. Its educational mission remains one of the most unique in the world. Visitors are not just passive observers, they are active learners. Workshops, lectures, and interactive programs invite people to explore the collection the way Barnes intended, through intuition, curiosity, and critical thought. The Foundation's Art Education Program continues to teach the Barnes Method, a system built on the principles of perception and visual literacy. Students learn to see beyond the surface to recognize how artists construct balance, rhythm, and unity within a composition. It's not about memorizing names or dates. It's about learning to see as artists see. Inside classrooms filled with natural light, modern students sit where Barnes's early learners once sat, discussing Renoir's warmth, Cezanne's structure, and Matisse's sense of harmony. Digital tools now enhance these experiences, but the essence remains unchanged. Art as a form of discovery, not instruction. Beyond its walls, the Barnes Foundation extends its mission through community outreach and partnerships. Programs for schools and underprivileged communities bring art education to those who might never step into a traditional museum. Through these efforts, Dr. Barnes's dream continues: the democratization of art, where beauty and knowledge belong to everyone, not just the privileged few. And yet, the Barnes Foundation doesn't merely preserve a method, it nurtures a mindset. It teaches that learning never ends, that art is not a static object but a living dialogue between the viewer and the world. In this sense, every visitor becomes a student, and every visit, a lesson. For artists, scholars, and dreamers alike, the foundation stands as a living legacy to a man who dared to challenge convention. Barnes's belief that art is a form of education for the soul continues to resonate across generations, inspiring people to see not just what is painted on the canvas, but what lies beneath emotion, structure, humanity itself. Even now, when visitors walk through the quiet galleries and gaze at the intricate ensembles, they're unknowingly taking part in the same experiment Barnes began a century ago, a journey of sight, thought, and feeling. Every brushstroke becomes a word, every color a sentence, every artwork a conversation waiting to be heard. Through this living legacy, Dr. Albert Barnes's voice still speaks, soft but unwavering, reminding us that art, when truly seen, is not just decoration. It is a teacher, a companion, a key to understanding who we are. And in that enduring mission, the Barnes Foundation remains one of the most extraordinary classrooms in the world, where education and beauty are one and the same, and where every visitor leaves not just inspired, but forever changed. As you reach the end of your journey through the Barnes Foundation, a quiet realization begins to settle in. This place, this sanctuary of color, light, and thought, is not simply a collection of paintings. It's a living testament to one man's belief that art could change the way we see the world, and in turn, the way we understand ourselves. Walking through its serene galleries, surrounded by masterpieces that have traveled through time and vision, you begin to grasp the deeper truth behind Dr. Albert C. Barnes's creation. He wasn't just collecting art, he was building a philosophy of life. Every canvas, every sculpture, every small object on the wall was placed to reveal a universal order, the hidden harmony that connects all things. Here, the great artists, Renoir, Cezanne, Matisse, Picasso, Van Gogh, are not distant legends. They are voices in an eternal conversation about beauty, truth, and emotion. Barnes believed that if you could learn to see these connections, you could learn to see the world more clearly with balance, empathy, and understanding. Even after all the controversy, the move, and the debates, the heart of his vision endures. In the glow of natural light, in the quiet hum of reflection, the Barnes Foundation continues to do what it was always meant to do: to teach without words, to inspire without instruction. It is a place where learning happens through feeling, and where art becomes a mirror for the human spirit. Stand in front of any painting, a woman's gaze in a Renoir, a blue horizon in a Cezanne, the fierce rhythm of a Picasso, and you'll sense what Barnes saw: that art, when truly observed, is not about wealth, status, or fame. It's about connection. It's about what happens inside you when your eyes meet the soul of another through color and form. That's why the Barnes Foundation remains timeless. It invites us to slow down in a world that never stops, to look deeper when we're taught, to glance, and to remember that true beauty is not just seen, it's felt. Dr. Barnes's legacy lives not only in the art on the walls, but in every visitor who leaves seeing the world a little differently, a little brighter, a little more alive. His vision reminds us that education and beauty are not separate things. They are two parts of the same truth, that understanding begins with seeing. And so, as you step back out onto the busy streets of Philadelphia, the echo of that vision stays with you. The city noise returns, the light changes, the day moves on, but somewhere inside, you carry a fragment of what you saw within those walls, a reminder that art is not just to be looked at but to be lived. Because here, at the Barnes Foundation, the greatest masterpiece of all is the way it changes the way you see the world.